welcome to Scorched Earth and a general reading for the sign of Scorpio, Sun, Moon or Ascendant for the month of October 2023. I hope you are well and happy birthday to all you October Scorpios out there. I'm using the Tarot of the Abyss for you today. Before we begin, if the reading resonates with you and you'd like to go a little bit deeper, there will be an extended that you can access at the end. That's the first link in the description box. The second link in the description box is to my private community, the Order of the Phoenix over on Circle. You can get access to all of the extended content for no extra cost and hang out with an extraordinary group of people, and I don't say that lightly. So if that sounds like it's something of interest to you, you know what to do. Right. Let's have a look and see what's going on with you, Scorpio. Can I have 3 cards for Scorpio, please? There's the first one. We have the 3 of Pentacles in your recent past. What about current energy for Scorpio? Oh, goodness, twirling out. We have the 2 of Swords. And what about what is coming towards Scorpio, please, for October? Oh, goodness, right. We've got 2 cards. We've got the Hanged Man in reverse and we've got the 8 of Cups. I like that. They both indicate movement. We have the 5 of Wands at the bottom of the deck here, and I think this 5 of Wands, although it's an underlying theme for the cards that are out on the table at the moment, it does represent a state of tension, and we have a state of tension also here with this 2 of Swords. They're not quite the same thing, but they do seem to be hand in hand here, and we've got somewhat of a. Sorry, I'm just throwing cards everywhere. There feels like there's something indicating tension in the 3 of Pentacles, which is not what that card should indicate at all. It represents teamwork and collaboration and cooperation, how we work together in order to, achieve a goal that is bigger than us, actually. But it feels kind of tense. So let's get some clarifiers out and see what's going on with that. Tell me about this 3 of Pentacles, please. Okay, we have the 8 of Swords, we have the Knight of Pentacles, and we have the 5 of Wands in reverse. Cool. I like that. I don't even know why I was covering the card up with that. Let's put them down here so that you can see them. Tell me about the 2 of Swords, please. Why is that here for Scorpio? So we've got the 2 of Pentacles. Got a lot of cards dancing around. We've got the 2 of Pentacles and we've got the 4 of Cups. And what about the Hanged Man in reverse and the 8 of Cups, please? 10 of Swords, 3 of Wands, fuck me, and then the 5 of Pentacles in reverse. I like this. I know I say that every month, actually, Scorpio. I say it to every sign every month. I do like this. And even in the readings where I tell people not to panic because something, a traditionally terrifying card of the tarot, like the Tower card or the Death card or something like that comes out. I like that too. Where some of you know, I've got quite a heavy Scorpio influence on my chart via the 8th house. And I think, like you, I share a need to know. I can't think of a Scorpio that I've ever known off the top of my head who was content with not knowing something. And it doesn't matter how difficult that truth is, they would rather know. I just read a quote just 10 minutes ago about that. I think it was a quote from Nietzsche. That it was a reflection of the quality of someone's soul as to how much truth they could tolerate. I mean, it was something along those lines. Anyway, it doesn't mean that you have to like the truth, but you do need to know it. And I think that's something that runs really, really strong within you, as it does within me. So, anyway, tension. There is quite a bit of it here. Now, that 3 of Pentacles, even before I drew the clarifiers, did feel like it was indicating some sort of tension around your your relationships, situationships, whatever they are, it does seem that the influence has been quite a lot on people for you recently. But I wonder if that's been in some way masking a deeper issue that you've been feeling within yourself. And whether there's been a possibility that that throwing yourself possibly into other people has been a subconscious mechanism that has acted as an exclusion to some deeper truths. And I say that because the Two of Swords is there, and as you know, like I rather brutally call that card sort of willful ignorance, and I'm not even sure that's particularly accurate a term. It is willful ignorance in so much as it is you not knowing what you don't know because your subconscious won't let you know it, right? The subconscious is in the process of trying to protect our worldview, trying to keep us as the heroes in our story, you know, and sometimes we find ourselves in a state of confusion trying to make sense of things that simply don't make sense. And it's because often the filters that we're using to process that information are clogged up. You know, maybe they don't need to be there at all. And that's the subconscious that's been doing that to you. And so in terms of what it is that you are trying to build, the ways that you've been trying to work together with other people, there seems to me that there's been information that's been coming in somehow to you that has proven to be incongruent with something. It'll be different for each of you. Obviously, this is a collective energy reading, so it's going to manifest differently for each of you. And I don't know if it's just been a... So my mother used to say when I was young, my bones rattled. And she used to say this whenever anybody lied to her, her bones rattled about stuff. If she had a bad feeling about something, my bones are rattling. And I always thought this was the most extraordinary thing. Until I got to about 17. And then one day I noticed some sort of feeling inside me, this internal recognition of something. Though I would put it more like my cells wiggle. It's almost like I could feel liquid in every single cell of my body just sloshing from side to side slightly. Not a bone rattling, but a cell sloshing. And I wonder if you've been having a bit of a cell slosh or a bone rattle recently. And what you've had difficulty with is trying to pin that particular feeling on something. Now, it could be that you found yourself engaging with your rather natural suspicion and directing that towards people outside of you. No, somebody in my environment is doing something that makes me feel, and my cells are sloshing around and I don't like it, or my bones are rattling and I don't like it. But I do feel like it's been somewhat masquerading an issue. And this is not a criticism of you, Scorpio, and I really, really hope that you don't take it that way. It just feels like it's been a bit of an obfuscation, a subconscious obfuscation, because we've got the Eight of Swords here, right? And the Eight of Swords refers to that energy where we feel sort of stuck or trapped or bound by something, right? But the bigger meaning of this card is where we're failing to think about something clearly enough that we can see all available options to us. It can speak to stagnant thinking about things, or certainly default thinking about things. And as we progress into the Nine of Swords, which is actually absent here, what we have is a loss of perspective that is caused by that. Now, you're not quite there, but we do leap straight from the 8 to the 10. So I don't think that you're thoroughly engaging in this energy to the extent that you have lost perspective. But certainly there's a restriction about the way that you're thinking about things, and perhaps the value of things. perhaps the value even of working together with people, having people in your environment of, whom you are now being suspicious, suspecting motives, suspecting behaviours, or suspecting suspicious motives and suspicious behaviours perhaps. But it just doesn't seem to have settled correctly within you. Because something about this is off. And like I said, when your subconscious is really, really busy with the act of trying to make sure you don't see something about yourself, that's often the way that this will manifest. But the Five of Wands is there, and it's in the reverse. Now it's in the upright here, and it's in the reverse over here. And that way round, it speaks about tension, it talks about conflict, and that can be internal or it can be external, right? Both are possible, and likely if you're experiencing one, you're probably going to experience the other as well. But we've got it over here in the reverse. Now, even just the fact that these two cards have appeared almost oppositionally is creating a state of tension in and of itself. Because we have struggle and we have strife, internal, external, whatever. But over here, we've got something that's trying to achieve anything but. It's almost like you're trying to keep the peace or trying not to rock the boat, and yet. Now, it might well be that the suspicions that you've turned outwards to other people are actually very well founded. But there is a bigger energy at play here, which is, it seems to me, attempting to teach you something about yourself that you currently do not see. Now, how have I got this Five of Wands in reverse? Like, I would almost feel more comfortable if that Five of Wands was in the upright there. And we've got the Three of Wands and the Knight of Wands here. The Knight of Wands is Sagittarius energy. This is Virgo energy over here. But we've got actions. We've got movement indicated in both of those cards. Interestingly, they're going in different directions. There's that same pulling apart of something, which is somewhat contrary to the energy of the Three of Pentacles. And the whole thing just feels like it is tense. The Three of Wands wants to go that way. The Knight of Wands wants to go this way. The Three of Pentacles wants to draw everybody together, as does the Five of Wands. But this upright Five of Wands here is also tense. Now, interestingly, we've got the Queen of Swords at the bottom of the deck here. She represents Libra. But she is the quality of making sense of what it is that we are seeing. She's the archetype that sifts through a great deal of information to work out what is true and what is not. And it's interesting that you should have these difficult energies of the swords on the table. Two of them really quite advanced. The Nine of Swords almost more significant in its absence. Because there's an underlying desire here to actually get to the truth of the matter. But there seems to be a lot of white noise around what the truth actually is. Now, like I said, I feel like this the bigger lesson of the energies here is a very internal one. But then I'm kind of biased in that respect anyway, because I do think that that's pretty much the way that everything goes. But it holds a particular significance for you here today, Scorpio, or at the point that you're reading this, or watching this reading. Because you know that there is something here about the way that you are thinking around the situation that isn't quite standing up to scrutiny. And I would be talking about your filtration system here, or your awareness, your sensitivities, all that sort of stuff, right? The stuff that you picked up in your cellular wiggle or your bone rattling or whatever. But it's just a bit off. And what it seems to me that you're having a trouble with is working out whether it is true that somebody else is off, or whether what you're feeling in yourself is that something in you is a bit off, and something about the way that you are thinking about things is a bit off. And although it hasn't felt like it, I do feel like you've been creeping closer and closer to the truth of the situation. Even though you felt like you were getting more and more stuck as you were doing it. I mean, that often is an indication that you're kind of getting close to something that your subconscious didn't want you to see. It sort of covers it in jam and then rolls it around in some dried leaves and stuff like that. It obscures what it is. And then kicks it into the corner of the garden, so you're not going to find it. That's what it's trying to do, at least. But you do keep finding it, and it's almost like your eye keeps being drawn to this thing, and you're saying, what is that under there? What's under all the leaves? Clear those off, this fucking jam or honey or whatever it's been smeared in. You're like, no, let's get this off as well. It's like simultaneously there's a desire to keep the peace but also blow things the fuck up. And I wonder if the blow things the fuck up, you're mindful of yourself enough to realise that likely there's some sort of subconscious trigger that's being fired over and over again internally. And so there isn't any action, there isn't any movement, even though everything in you wants to move and wants to do a thing. It's almost like you're keeping yourself still until you work out what it is. Now, when we move into your current energy, we have this 2 of Swords here, 2 of Pentacles, and the 4 of Cups. Now, for me, the cards number 2 in the tarot indicate internal stuff, right? The 3 is the outward expression of it. 2, it makes it very internal. These are often cards of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Losing it. Consequences. We're going to go with that. Consequences. In the 2 of Swords, there is that understanding that there is something that is not being seen here yet. We don't know what we don't know. But sometimes we get to a point where we realise that we don't know what we don't know. So it becomes a known unknown. The 2 of Pentacles for me, although it talks about juggling and all this kind of thing, right? It really is a card of coping. We see this character here in the foreground, and this is one of the staged cards, as it were, that Pamela Coleman Smith designed. She was a set designer by trade. And there are a few cards where, we're shown something that makes us understand that there is a stage here and it is being performed upon. So there becomes this like performative aspect to the coping, and we can see that even further still because we've got waves in the background here, and these are not little waves. This is a big choppy sea. There is an emotional maelstrom happening here in the background. So although your eye is drawn to the coping in the front, there's something facade-like about the energies here versus what is actually going on in the background. This is almost for the consumption of your conscious mind and by extension everybody else that you're trying to convince you're coping. And this is actually what's going on in the background. And I think that this 2 of Swords here is speaking to the tension that is occurring between what's happening in the foreground and what's happening in the background, the burgeoning awareness of there being a gulf between them, that they're not actually in alignment, they're not representing thoroughly, authentically what is going on within and what is going on without. Now, remember that your external world is a reflection of your internal world. I know that you know that because you feel to me like you've already picked up on that. So rather than leaping to conclusions and saying, I've had a feeling and this person is terrible, it's kind of like, actually, regardless of whether that's true or not, what is this thing that I can feel inside of me? And what does it mean? And we've got the Four of Cups. Now, if you've watched my videos for any length of time, you will know that I associate this very, very closely with abandonment issues. We've got a sense of rejection or rejecting. It can sometimes indicate boredom or apathy. Couldn't get that word out there for a second. But it can also speak to a kind of self-imposed isolation, a self-imposed loneliness. We've got this, lovely little sky hand just proffering a cup. And this character doesn't even appear to be looking at it. We've got this gift from the divine that is appearing here. We've got 3 cups at the bottom here all stacked together, and the 3 of cups for me is emotional support networks and, the people on whom we rely and who rely on us. That interdependence, emotional interdependence. And we've got this additional cup that is being directly offered to the character, and the body language says, I don't fucking want it. And the funny thing is, I think that you do, Scorpio. This is the thing. Now, the Ace of Cups for me speaks directly to the relationship that you have with yourself, the potential that is contained within the relationship that you have with yourself. Because ultimately, no matter who is around, at some point, everybody leaves. Oh, that sounds a little bit depressing, doesn't it? I just mean that the only constant companion that you have throughout life is you. From childhood to adulthood to seniority. People come, people go. The only consistent character in your play is you. And I think that your conscious mind has done a really good job of appearing to cope. But the awareness is increasing that actually that might not be entirely accurate. And one of the first things that we do when we really, really crave attention, company, love, acceptance, is kick it away from ourselves. It's a trauma response for sure, but it comes from a place of understanding that very thing that you crave, that very thing that you want, is inherently threatening. And that would come from early experiences, right? So somebody who has been loved unconditionally in childhood, nurtured and supported and all that kind of thing, is less likely to be in this state than someone who has been neglected and abandoned. Right? We're back to abandonment issues, right? Those people who have a strong functional support network around them, on whom it is possible for them to lean, and they welcome the leaning of other people at times where it is necessary, do not snap into this space. And the Five of Pentacles over here is almost implied over here, but in its upright. Because for me, that is a card of abandoning your own basic needs. It means lots of things, and isolation and all that sort of stuff would definitely be a part of that. But this feels like it's something that runs really fundamental. Now, it's interesting just how much of an influence your sign seems to be having over the readings that I have been doing so far this month. The Scorpio energy has actually been writ large, which is interesting because we're in Libra season. So why the fuck is Scorpio suddenly taking such an interest in everybody else? I don't know. I can't answer that. Perhaps astrologers amongst you might have an idea about why that might be happening. But it's like for everybody, the depths are being dredged this month and things are coming up to the surface almost unintentionally. They're certainly not being looked for, but like I said, there's this kind of increasing awareness that there's something there and we don't really quite know what it is yet. But almost across the board, it seems like the more you try and pull away from it, the stronger the traction beam that is pulling you in. Tell me about this Four of Cups, please. Touché. We have the Six of Cups and we have the Five of Wands again in the upright. Now, I don't want you to lie back on the couch, Scorpio, and tell me about your childhood, but I think that a conversation with yourself about your childhood is probably something that is coming to the surface for you this month, because it seems to me that you are feeling conflicted whilst also smart enough and evolved enough to know that everything outside of you is a reflection of something inside of you, right? So you're trying to keep the peace on the inside, but, well, you're trying to keep the peace in the outside, rather. But there's something here that feels like it's almost disrespecting you. And it feels like the call is coming from inside the house, Scorpio. There's something about the way that you are dealing with this that isn't taking into account something really, really important. And I see this a lot with people, particularly the toxic positivity crowd, right? They want to leap from being wounded to being these, absolute embodiments of live, laugh, love and all that sort of shit. And that's not you, Scorpio. We know that. I'm not even going to lay that at your feet because it's bullshit. And what the live, laugh, love crowd, good vibes only, forget, is that without dealing with what it is that perhaps you have a justifiable righteous anger about, without actually addressing that and allowing it to heal, the shadowy aspects of you that you're trying so hard to avoid will actually become denser and darker and come out more readily in more toxic behaviours than if you had just sat and spent the time with it. Now, you are a sign that will sit and spend the time with it. But it's almost like you've hopped over something that you didn't see at the time. It almost didn't seem as important as everything else that you were dealing with. And this month, whatever that is coming back up to the surface for attention. Because we have the Six of Cups, which is representative of the past, more specifically, your past. Quite likely your childhood, actually. So despite the fact that I didn't want you to lie back and tell me about your childhood, it's being indicated. And we've got this Five of Wands here. We've got this strife. We've got this conflict. We've got this struggle. Now, you've done so much work in the last 18 months, Scorpio. You came from behind and took everybody by surprise, as Scorpio is wont to do, right? And there's so much that is peaceful about your energy now, and I think that is something that you would not willingly give up now. Now that you've achieved that sense of peace, you don't want anything to rock the boat with that, because it's too fucking important. But I don't know if there's an aspect of a desire to try to keep being at this particular level of vibration that is now stopping you, or has been stopping you, from addressing something else. That now all of the big stuff's been moved out of the way, it's been released, it's been let go. It's kind of saying, I think you're ready to deal with me now. And you're like, fuck off, I'm trying to keep the peace. Fuck off, I'm trying to be keeping everybody together, I'm trying to build something, this is all really good. Like, I'm not ready for this destabilization that seems to be knocking at the door. Do you know what else is missing from this reading, Scorpio? Any card that represents you. It is the 5. Oh no, shit, no, the 6. 6 of Cups is there. But how interesting that the one card that represents you is the 6 of Cups. We don't have the Death card here. We don't have the Tower card here. We don't have the Judgment card here. You know, normally when your energy presents on a reading, it is there. Yeah, I've always said, like, that Scorpio and Leo are the signs that always show up for their own readings, fully. Taurus, trailing third. Because authenticity is so important to these two signs. And their own personal authenticity is so important to these signs as well, increasingly. It's been one of the things that you've been dealing with, actually. You've demanded authenticity from other people since day one, but it's been difficult sometimes for you to show up authentically because of the way that you've had to close down on things in order to survive. But you've been creeping out of the darkness bit by bit and reaching towards the light for quite a long time now, and this feels like it's something that reminds you of the old. And there's a surprising amount of resistance to going and having a look at what that actually is. Like I said, I don't think that you've even necessarily been able to articulate to yourself that that's what it is, although it's been slowly nibbling at your ankles every time you allow yourself to think about it for a second. There's something that can't be squared away. There's a way in which the coping here is performative, Scorpio. Because something in your past is reaching forwards and touching something in your present. And so it doesn't matter how much stability and harmony and cooperation you're trying to enable, the fact that there's another part of you that is going, and trying to head off in a different direction. Like, it's that tension between the two things that is showing that there is something here that needs working with. There's something that needs sitting with. And it is in your past. That's where it is. It's not in your present. It's nothing to do with what's going on now. It is directly related to this. And you have no hope of this. Less chance of this without addressing what this is and where this comes into it. Now, you know, for some of you, it might have been growing up in an abusive environment. It might be physically abusive, it might have been psychologically abusive, emotionally abusive. Any one of the number of abuses that we can think about, right? That's possible. But it could also be something that is directly related to the emotional model that you had to follow. And so it might not have been overtly abusive, but there might have been an underlying tension there that you, Scorpio, are absolutely primed to be able to understand. Something unpredictable. I mean, for some of you, it just could have been a situation which was overtly competitive. And that might well have been because the people in the household did not feel like their needs were getting met. So it was a competition then. Who could get all of the attention? What was it that you had to do to get that? Like, I could see it working out lots of different ways for all of you. In a jostling for dominance, like, you literally never came out on top because you were too small to. Which means that you were never really taken seriously. Now, like I said, there's something about that situation which is reaching forwards and tapping you on the shoulder in the present. and saying, hey, you forgot about me. But you've screened it out, and you screened it out for good reason. I mean, whenever this sort of stuff occurs, it's always got a good intent at the centre of it. But I don't think that you can turn away from it anymore, in all honesty. Because when we move into October, we've got the Hanged Man in reverse and we've got the Eight of Cups. And as I said at the beginning, like, both of these cards represent movement in their own, respective ways. Is the Hanged Man is a card of stasis, right? It's a card of Pisces. It talks about, looking at things from a different perspective, turning yourself upside down and all that sort of thing in one instance. But in the other instance, it talks about submission and sacrifice, right? And within all of these things, there's this idea that you suspend yourself upside down in this state of voluntary discomfort until the penny drops. Literally see coins on the ground underneath the Hanged Man, right? The pennies are dropping. But when it shows up in the reverse, it says there has been enough contemplation of this thing now, that it is time for you to get down from where you have voluntarily, inverted yourself, because the wisdom of the situation has been achieved. Now, and I would take from this that the energy that you've been going through for the last wee while, and it's in your present and it's also in your recent past, has been kind of crunchy in some way or another. I imagine that your personal relationships have been under a great deal of tension. I think that this been boiling under the surface for a little while, and I think it's been bringing up feelings in you that you have found curious. And I think it's that curiosity in combination with your desire to get to the truth of something rather than be right, for example, which is something that I'm really, really vibing with as a concept right at the moment. That is really drawing to your attention the performative quality of your coping. And I think for a lot of you, there's been a significant amount of surprise at the way that you felt. But as we're kind of coming down here and we're starting to see what the component parts of what it is that you do not see are kind of splitting apart and coming down to deeper and deeper and deeper. I mean, I do think that this is all that is required, is the ability to go looking for the thing that you don't know. The thing that you feel, but that you don't know. Because sometimes the other thing that the Two of Swords talks about is the need to make a decision. But the inability to make a decision, because you're essentially trying to choose between two things that effectively are identical. They're not. But they feel like they are. And you might have felt like you didn't have any emotional investment in being right, and maybe that's what it is that you're starting to see. Because as you are here in October, perspective has been changed. But now it's time to get off the fucking tree, Scorpio. I did ask you last month what you were waiting for. A message that I think was received quite well by the overwhelming majority of Scorpios. There were a few who weren't interested in that message, which is fine. You have to take what resonates to you and leave the rest. This is a collective energy reading after all. But we have also movement within the Eight of Cups. We've got something that is emotionally being put down. It is something that belongs to a past version of you that really has no business reaching forwards and tapping you on the shoulder in the present. To move from here to here to here emotionally, I think is very, very powerful. And to do it through the willingness to look at something from a different perspective and then get down off the fucking tree and do the thing. It's a very powerful move indeed, particularly when you are looking for the truth. And we've got the Ten of Swords, one of those, crunchy energy cards, the Three of Wands, and the Five of Pentacles in reverse. But this feels to me to be incredibly fucking illuminating for you for October, because the Ten of Swords does speak to, as we are well aware, the really painful endings. It can talk about humiliation, betrayal. It's the feeling of lying on the floor and being kind of left for dead in some sort of way. But the interesting thing is that this is not to do with the people that are around you. This is an entirely internal situation. And I think it's the extent to which you have been carrying emotional baggage around with you that you thought you had long since jettisoned. The reality of the situation is that hasn't been the case. One of the things that isn't talked about so often with the Ten of Swords is the fact that this chap's head is turned towards the rising dawn. It's like, no matter how bad things are, the sun will always rise again. And here it is. It's always darkest before dawn and all that sort of shit, right? And we say all of these sorts of things. But here the light is beginning to crest the horizon. And we go from here to then standing up and being able to see things clearly. If the sun is representative of our consciousness and our human intelligence, as it is often given to be, then what we've got is it kind of creeping over the horizon where we're starting to see it to be being bathed in its absolute glory over here. With the Three of Wands being the actions that we take. Sometimes I see this as changed behaviour, and I think that that's probably quite a useful thing here. Doing things differently, showing up differently. But showing up as it is here with the Five of Pentacles, it's the actions that you take to stop abandoning your own basic needs. All the cards that are numbered 5, right? 5 of Wands, 5 of Pentacles, 5 of Cups. There's an inherent instability with all of those. We take what was foundational in the 4 and it gets blown up in the 5, and that can feel terribly punishing. But it's all part of the process. It's part of the process of refinement, of honing the message. We don't just build a foundation and then sit there, as the chap is doing here in the Four of Cups. We create the foundation so that we might build on top of it. And if your foundation has not been strong enough to support you building on top of it, then it needs to be changed. It's going to be unstable. Now, the most useful thing that you can do to a card that is numbered 5 in the Minor Arcana is to reverse it, because there is the stabilization of something that has been hitherto entirely unstable. And we have positive action to do this. This here feels to me like a realization of sorts. As I mentioned before about how the ego was doing its best to shield you from certain truths. When I say certain truths, it seemed to be related to things that you have understood from childhood and carried forwards in a rather unchallenged state right up until where you are here right now, until it had an opportunity to surface. To the situations that you find yourself in the present that have actually touched those triggers have been incredibly valuable, because they've given you access to something that you would not have seen, could not have seen in any other way. But to our subconscious mind, like acceptance of the things that we have spent so long trying to jettison from us, right? Certain truths about ourselves, certain truths about the way that we consider the world to work from our perspective formed in childhood. The challenging of those will have us incredibly defensive. because these are the pillars on which our reality is based. If we don't have those, we're spinning. We don't have an anchor point. And so to the subconscious and to the sympathetic nervous system and to all of those kind of things, it's like, that can't be true. Because for it to be true is so threatening, our nervous system is completely convinced we'll just die. And that's honestly the process. What we have encapsulated within the Ten of Swords here is the idea that we can die and be reborn. Like, things can be true and we can still continue. Not only that, we can be improved, we can do more with the knowledge that we have now that we see the thing. Like, in some time, you know, I think a lot of personal work is going around in circles. We hope we're going around in spirals, right? But there's a lot of going back to things that happened at points of our formative development and looking at it with new eyes. Looking at it with a stronger character, whereby we can tolerate all levels of truth. Back to Nietzsche again. And still persevere, that we can actually use this as fuel to drive ourselves forwards. You know, the Eight of Cups is a release. But what is implied within that cup is that we are now steps closer to the Nine of Cups, which is our highest goals, hopes, dreams, aspirations, right? It's the wish card and all that sort of stuff. But it's also about the management of your emotions. I feel that very, very strongly. We're a step closer to being able to fully manage our emotions rather than being managed by them. And what's really startling in October is where there is something that feels now, on reflection, really obvious that it would be a problem for you. But until this point had not been seen. So despite all of the crunchy energy and all of the tension here, we've actually got a really wonderful outcome, because the truth that you're seeking is the truth that you find, and it's something that's actually within your power to do something about. Only you have the ability to be able to let go of emotional baggage. Nobody else can do that for you. It doesn't matter how well somebody treats you. It's not going to touch those internal wounds unless you do the work. And you can only really do the work if you know where the work is. This month is about showing you where the work is and then getting to a point where you can do it. You know, the other thing that the Ten of Swords represents here is an end. It is completion. I think one of the biggest lessons of the Suit of Swords is that we don't need all the fucking swords. You know, the point at which our subconscious starts creating these shielding mechanisms, these coping mechanisms that we put in place in order to survive. It's because we don't know any better, and they actually help. You know, whether it's dissociating slightly from the situation that you're in, right, which leads eventually to this kind of detachment that we that we practice later on in life, or, you know, whatever, any one of a number of coping strategies that we put in place, it does keep us alive. But like all coping strategies, there is a point at which they all have an inbuilt expiration date. And rather than being supportive or protective or even defensive, they end up getting to a point where they restrict us. They stop us moving forwards. And this one's hit its expiration date. It wants you to release it, Scorpio. And instead of getting lost in the struggle, realizing that the struggle is pointing to something else, an earlier struggle, and making our peace with that, we can start moving forwards again. What have I got at the bottom of the deck here? Queen of Pentacles. The Queen who understands the value of investment in self, taking care of self, nurturing self. I think it would be a bit trite to say that you'll be feeling better at the end of October, Scorpio, but I kind of think that you will. But more importantly than that, the peace and the harmony and the togetherness that you've been trying so desperately to build over here will be considerably less effort here. Because the thing that's been acting as an obstruction to it, or whatever, that which is being subconsciously resisted by you, isn't a roadblock anymore. And so the flowing can start in earnest, because there is movement here, and it feels quite gentle, but it feels quite purposeful too. Right. Oh, I've been prattling on forever. Right. I'm going to go over to the extended now, so you're very welcome to join me over at Vimeo if you would like to, or at Circle if you'd like to come and join the community. You're very welcome in both places. If that's not of interest to you, that's no problem whatsoever. This crunchy energy is not going to last forever, Scorpio. And I think that the more willing that you are to sit with the possibility that it might be something internal, which I think most of you have suspected anyway, and just allow to come to light whatever will, the easier the transition out of this energy. That's how I would put it. So, know that I love you all very, very much. And I'll see you soon.